episode of Baha'i On Air. We're recording this in Rotorua at the Baha'i Arts and Spirituality Conference, and today we're going to be speaking to Michael Knopf. Michael is from Cairns, Australia, and he works as a lecturer, a musician and a composer. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Beth.
Can you tell us first of all something about your career as a musician?
I'm a musician who likes a lot of different activities, and in the past I've played everything from hard rock and country and western music to jazz to classical to flamenco, and now I am primarily concerned as a composer to write music for solo instruments, for orchestra, for choirs, for solo voice and that sort of thing, community music.
You live in Cairns, Australia. How come you were invited to come and participate in this conference?
Well, this conference was, from a unique standpoint, arts and spirituality, and someone had heard of my work as a Baha'i composer with music that's, well, in a large part concerned with the soul and with social relationships and I guess the progress towards a world society, and knew that I was heavily involved in that, and so they asked me to participate. I feel that musicians in particular, and artists in general, have a great responsibility to assist mankind through the what I see as an age of transition from a fractured world of many different nations and tribes and cultures and language groups and all that sort of thing into a global federated family, if you will, of mankind. And of course that transition is a painful one, and part of the aspect of treating grief or pain is to have music to inspire and to uplift. And I feel that aside from that function, a musician can not only inspire and uplift people, but they can also edify and encourage attitudes and I suppose paradigms or mental ways of thinking of how things could be happening in society, approaches to other cultures, approaches to other peoples who think differently than you. And musicians can be bridges, can build bridges for different sections of humanity that haven't confronted each other before. So a musician carries with themselves a power, I think, in performance because of I believe, the spiritual nature of music. It has a great impact on hearts and souls and minds, and enables people to discover realities that they don't normally encounter in their everyday normal life.
So it sounds like you think that conferences of this nature are actually very valuable and well worthwhile.
Yes, I think if anything, there should be many, many more of them in every part of the world, so that it acquires a great participation on the part of artists of all sorts. This one is not primarily concerned with music, though music has a great part to play here. It also has dancers, it has poets, it has painters and sculptors, and all sorts of artists in every form, of popular to high art, if you will. And it's that sort of interface between popular musicians and, if you will, serious artists and popular artists that creates an environment where everyone learns and everyone is enabled to get something from another person for their own art. And in the same way, they can also learn how to contribute in their own art to things like, I suppose, with a social conscience, social cohesion, thinking of how to bring people together, which is something I'm primarily concerned in my music. I write music for communities to sing and to perform, which doesn't take a lot of musical talent. They can just come together and do things. And then I also write things that would be only for concert artists to undertake.
So when we come together, I just read it.
Yeah, we'll get very soft.
But
okay. You're here doing this or whatever it is, you step out and you walk and face the audience. My soul, and declaim it.
Reflected outwardly like a stainless mirror.
Michael, you live in Cairns in Australia, but your accent is not an Australian accent. Can you tell us about your background? No, it's not.
I was born in the U.S. in a little town called Wabasha, Minnesota, and whose claim to fame is that it's on the Mississippi River, and it has a hotel that you can stay at. When you hire the room, you can actually choose your choice of cat to sleep on the foot of the bed.
Choice of cat?
Yes, it's only in America. And
yeah, I think so, yes.
Yes, and my parents left there and went to Kansas, and so I was raised and educated in Kansas, attended university there, and actually attended university where there was a very wonderful jazz guitarist who was a teacher there, and had the good fortune of having him there. And moved to Australia in 1982 to visit some friends who I'd met on Baha'i pilgrimage. Met the sister and married her.
Ah, so that's how you came to be in Australia.
Yes,
okay,
right.
And you've been there ever since?
Ever since, yes.
Right, and you don't regret the
Three
move?
kids.
3 kids.
A dog.
A dog.
And a double mortgage.
A double mortgage. No cats on the end of the
No
bed?
cats, no.
No cats?
No. Not in Australia.
Not in Australia.
You know, the human spirit is one that defies reason, doesn't it? You know that if you walk through the fire to get the child out of the burning house, you know that you will burn and you have a possibility of ceasing to exist. But the human spirit says, I will do this. On the other hand, the human spirit also says, I know that if I drink too much alcohol, I'm going to kill my brain cells and I'm going to get sick. And then you say, okay, well, I'll do it anyway. So it can be used either way. Spiritual life isn't something just hairy-fairy in my view. It's a discipline. It means that you exercise the spiritual powers of the soul through acts of virtue, through acts of art, and through the promotion of justice and equity in all of our human relationships.
The Baha'i writings, to my knowledge, are the only world scriptural base that really emphasizes music as one of the most important things in arts and science. And it's called, it's said in the Baha'i writings that it is of paramount importance, and that's the top of the mountain. And the way I view that statement is something that people, as of yet, do not fully understand, the importance of music. In the Baha'i writings, for example, Abdul-Baha, who is one of the central figures of the faith, mentions that music, that singing, the human voice, is one of those material things that have a connection to the spiritual world. And because of that connection, it has a powerful influence. So that says to me that we should spend more time singing, alone, and also in community groups. So that has influenced the way I have approached composing music. In the same light, I think music is an experience not unlike religion or revelation itself. I look at the great messengers or prophets in the past, like Christ or Muhammad or Baha'u'llah, as the greatest artists, because they instill in a handful of words a sense of wonder and beauty and direction that no other poet can rival. It's their words that that do in fact build and create new civilizations, and they demand change. And a true artist always demands change from his audience, so that they're always on the edge of life and they're always learning from what they're experiencing in an art.
I've got to pick up on that point, because I heard you speaking this morning about improvisation and how you're working right on the edge of failure. Can you tell us some more about that?
Improvisation means that there are two different things that I look at the definition for this sort of thing. One is experimentation, when you don't know what the outcome is, so you experiment to find something. And when you find something, you use it as a musical tool, as part of your vocabulary to perform with. When you improvise, you tend to put little blocks of pieces together that you have maybe done before or approached before, and put them together in a way that you've never performed in that way.
So in my field of improvisation, what I endeavor to do when I'm performing is use the mind to draw on memory and things I've done in the past, an understanding of what I'm doing, and use a little bit of imagination and go. But there'll come a moment of silence in the performance inside where I don't know what to do. What do you do from here? And then you allow that second source of thought to release something. And that something might be just one idea, one note. So I play the guitar here, do a heavy vibrato, and listen to the resonance. That might just come from nowhere. And then the mind takes over, okay, take that and develop into other pitches, other areas, and go.
You mentioned earlier on that you write also for cello, but I know that your major instrument is the guitar. How do you do that?
Well, when you train as a composer, you have to learn the limitations and the qualities of every instrument so that you can write for it properly, and that takes a lot of detailed practice and study and midnight terrors, and eventually you come to an understanding of how the instrument operates. I like composing, for example, for cello because I played it a little bit for a while to teach it because I love the sound of it so much. Oh. And for orchestra, you listen, you read scores, you sound ideas off of other composers. You learn, and generally you learn how to manipulate the forces that you have to deal with. So, and hopefully you get them performed enough where you learn from the performances of them. So.
You mentioned earlier on that you also draw on science for inspiration, and I didn't understand how you did that. Can you tell us some more about that?
Well, science, I guess the great scheme of things, the great visionary aspects of science are what attracts me, because to me there's not a difference really between science and religion, in that when you stand on the edge of a huge creature on Earth, for example, I was discussing somebody today about Californian redwoods. When you stand in a forest of Californian redwoods, you're struck with a sense of awe. When you consider that the nearest star system to us is 4.5 light years, you'd have to travel 150,000 miles a second for 4.5 years to get there. These sorts of things make you stand in awe of the universe. And it's that the emotion that I acquire from consideration of science and from the universe, the nature of the universe.
And I believe, like the author Guy Murchie in his book, The Seven Mysteries of Life, that the world is coming to a flowering, that human civilization is coming to a flowering that it has never seen before. Very positive statement, a very encouraging statement, that we are reaching this area, and this symbolizes the maturation of the human race and the end of its social evolution on this planet. That's a tremendous statement. We are heading towards the highest pinnacle of our social evolution. It doesn't look that way now, obviously, but that's where we're heading. Human beings are, to me, a supernatural being, supernatural society. We are above nature, though part of it, an integral part of it, and we influence it. It does influence us, but we obviously, through our arts and our science, are at the pinnacle of creation. So musicians and artists in general must take a role in assisting mankind in this process of transition from a destructive, outworn ideology that no longer works in the worldview of a global society. And we have to assist in that transition to a world society, a global society that is just and open. Spirituality I like to define as the state of being human. That's what defines us as being human, as distinct from the animal kingdom. If we are not spiritual, then we are not acting human. And spirituality entails quite a few different things. All of us have spiritual powers. We possess soul, and these powers that the soul possesses are beyond the physical, but which are expressed by physical means. And so we see the arts, we see the power of the soul in discovery, in the unwinding of abstruse problems in science, and by the development of the sense of the sacred in our social and religious relationships. One of the things that a soul manifests in human society that is not in animal society at all is the power of love and altruism, which sticks its beautiful head up in the mass of humanity from time to time in very obvious ways, and sometimes manifests itself in the smallest of relationships in family and community. This love, this altruism, which is the power of our souls, which is the aim, in my understanding, of our spiritual path, entails the willing sacrifice of yourself for others, the giving of yourself to others. And we see that as an integral part of the arts. If the arts are selfish, they are no longer arts, are they?
I was a child in the 60s, and that was the guitar age, and everybody was playing guitar, popular country western music. And my half-brothers, who were adults at the time, were country and western singers. And they used to come to the house for occasional visits and play cowboy music and Roger Miller songs and that sort of thing. And I loved it, and I wanted that. So on my 10th birthday, my mother gave me a choice of $10 cash or a $27 guitar. Of course, I took the $27 guitar. I went home and phoned my best friend. I said, let's start a band.
You were 10 years old and you started your first band?
Well, that was just, I didn't know a thing. So it took about 2 years before we got our first band together. But I played rock music and what was called acid rock in those days. And when I became a Baha'i at the age of 16, I realized I should reach higher and higher. And so I decided to study jazz, and then I decided to study classical composition, and then I decided to study flamenco, and it's gone on and on. So I keep reaching a little bit higher here and there. So.
I see that you have a didgeridoo here as well, and I know that you play that. Can you tell us how you came to learn the didgeridoo?
My wife manages an Aboriginal art and crafts shop, and that's when I first encountered didgeridoos firsthand, and I learned to play them. And then what I saw on the market for teaching people how to play didgeridoo was very poor. So I wrote a method book in cassette and produced that so that it would be a little bit easier to learn from it. But it's not a difficult instrument to play. You have to do a little motorboat with the lips and keep that going with a little bit of air coming sniff through the nose and pushed out this way. And then you make vocal sounds here with the voice and tonguing, using the tongue against the teeth and shaping the lips. You come up with a lot of different sounds.
Spirit of the dreaming, the colours of the land sing in the heartscape of my dreaming, a song sung red gold in the oratorio of a sunset, striking air and fire into black earth where I rise, an eternal tide lined into ochred cliffs, my face a lighthouse for my people who wander in storm-thrown grey ash places where the dust hangs, wraith pale under indigo and Orion, timeless, the colours of my land. Resonate the dreamer, an endless desert plexus stretched like a skin to the drum, the dream. A pulse, rhythm of a creation, uncoiling, earth to flesh, womb to river, soul to sacred sight, life, the spirit dancer, green leaf, light and quick, into the whirl of eddies on a summer brown river, turning chameleon under a changeling sky, white, water, swift, and strong against the wind where the colours of the landscape coalesce, separate, dissolve, at the edges of oceans like my people's footprints in sand, their dance a dreaming track, haunting across time, where I rise, the artesian flame flickering in the dancer's shadow.
Sunday I go to the synagogue. I get on my knees and I pray. This is what I say. Won't you look down and have mercy on me?
Well, I was raised as a Roman Catholic, and I had my goal as a young man. I thought about becoming a priest.
Oh, okay.
And when I became a little bit older man, decided that wasn't the way to go. And a few of my friends and my brother were looking into alternative ways at that. The age of the 60s was one where you were questioning society, you were changing things all the time. And we started questioning people's understanding of the Bible. And at that age of 12 and 14, in this age, I started reading the Bible for myself and with my brother. And we thought that the way modern Christianity was going was not in line with the teachings of Jesus. And then we also discovered things like that the Muslims believe in the same God, and that they believe in Jesus and Moses and Abraham. So that was hard for us to grasp. And we started looking into Hinduism, and we got books and we read books, and we formed an informal brotherhood of investigation, so to speak. And one day a friend called and said, look, there's a meeting, there's some people called Baha'is, come along and have a listen. And my brother and I and another friend went, and when we heard the teachings of Baha'u'llah, we thought, these are what's right for today. He recognized that Christ is from God, that his station is the Son of God, but that Muhammad was also from God, and Moses and Abraham and Buddha and Krishna, and that a new messenger from God had come, Baha'u'llah. And we believed it immediately and went and told our parents, and they laughed. They thought it was a bit funny. And then when we got a phone call later on, my father got quite upset that we were looking into it and thought it was something strange like communism or something. So we ended up being kicked out of the house for a couple of days.
Oh, really?
And,
you and your brother?
Yes. And when we came back, it was all quite secretive for a while, until such time that my mother came into my room when I was 16 or 17 or so and said, you don't have to hide your prayer book anymore. And
that was how many years later?
that was a few years later.
A few years later.
So when I was 18 or 19, I was doing a lot of Baha'i things and going to university, and my parents accepted it, and they were quite pleased that that happened, because it kept me out of the scene that my friends went down, drugs and all that sort of thing. And as far as an influence on my life, from that age, I read a lot of things, the history of the Baha'i faith, the most important letters that were written in the 30s and 40s about world order and world civilization. These things were always in my mind, because the world is in such turmoil, and I thought that the Baha'i message has the answer to all these things that are happening in the world, the negative things. It was a very positive response. And the more I studied the faith, the more it influenced my music. I remember, for example, when I was 16 or 17, and my brothers and my, I guess you call it heavy metal band, back then it was called acid rock, we were writing songs about the day of God and all these sorts of things, but with a very heavy metal sound.
That must have been interesting.
So the Baha'i faith has always been in my mind for writing. When I started studying jazz, I wrote pieces that were influenced by the faith in some way, or music itself, or by science. And now I write a lot of choral music using the Baha'i writings.
So your brother also became a Baha'i?
Yes.
Right. So
he's a drummer.
Oh, he's a drummer?
Yes.
Michael, it's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank
Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we close?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for being with us today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
We've been speaking with Michael Knopf from Cairns, Australia, at the Baha'i Conference on the Arts and Spirituality in Rotorua. This is Baha'i On Air. Please join us again next week. Goodbye.